I have been searching.
Welcome to Following the Fire, a podcast for Christians who are rethinking their faith and need a safe place to doubt. As we wander through the spiritual wilderness, we want to find and follow God wherever the pillar of fire leads.
And just like God's people in the Bible, we get lost, we miss the point, and we don't have all the answers. But maybe that's okay. We're on this journey together. I'm Nathan.
And I'm Steve.
Even on my heart can't compare with what.
So we commonly refer to the before times, and I think in most people's minds that's been like a line in time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And like we were sent home, or they closed restaurants, or whatever that time was when it like suddenly became not normal. But maybe it's more like the Dark Ages, where it's not like one thing, it's just a cascade, and it's going to last for like 600 years. And so we're just, we thought it was like, oh, before and after, but now we're enduring. It's not before and after. It's just like, this is it. This is the middle section.
You know why I like talking to you, Nathan? You're just keeping everything light and happy.
Yeah. I always, has the news been rough this week? Well, tune in and I will tell you why it's worse than you think.
Yeah, there has been a whole lot of news since you and I really talked, I guess. Lots.
Yeah. I think there was this, it's kind of like, again, when COVID happened and then we started notice it was like murder hornets and fires and all of these things started happening.
Mm-hmm.
There was a week that felt like that was like all kinds of things happening at once.
Yep.
And then now I'm back in the mode of looking for disasters in the news. So there was like, you know what I mean? Like I'm just waiting for like, it kind of fits the theme, or it fits we had an episode on that. What's it called? When your brain tricks you into thinking there's a pattern?
Oh, shoot.
I can't think of the name for what those are, but
cognitive bias.
Yeah. Cognitive biases. So,
yeah, you know how Facebook does the 5 years ago memory thing or whatever.
Uh-huh.
The one came up like last week. It said like from 2 years ago, and it's like I posted some meme about like waking up in the morning. What new tragedy has happened today? It's like, oh, it's still going on.
Still going on. Yeah. Captain's log. We're just hardened pandemic survivors at this point, it feels like. But it was starting to feel, maybe that's what it was. So we were starting to get out of that feeling of disaster over and over. And, politics as normal felt like politics as usual for a little bit. You can go out to a restaurant again.
Yep.
So people are going back to work. So maybe that's what it was. Yeah. It's like in Colorado when it's been a miserable winter all along, and then you get a week and it's sunny and it's warm and everybody goes out in shorts and stuff.
Yeah.
And then it's fake. It snows again. It's still winter. Maybe that's what we're feeling right now is we were just starting to get back to normal and we couldn't keep going. I don't even know where to start because like so much of it intersects with like faith or deconstruction or Christianity and politics.
Well, I mean, we got plenty to go over the past 2-3 weeks. There's enough to go on for like a dozen episodes.
There really are.
Oh,
yeah, did you ever play Oregon Trail?
Yeah.
Okay. I played it in elementary school, maybe even in like first grade or something in like computer class, which, now that I think back on it, I learned to type when I was like 28. So, but I did play a lot of Oregon Trail in computer class. But I always died of scurvy or something. I never got the medical treatments right, and I always felt like I was so bad at that game. But I guess if like a first grader would not survive making medical decisions for his family on the Oregon Trail, so it makes sense. But you go along, and then you get to a big old river,
right?
And then you have to figure out. It's like this huge debate. Like, are you gonna row or are you gonna wade? You know, it's like row versus wade, and you don't know which one to do.
Wow, you got
and
me there.
I always picked the wrong one. That's my dad joke for the day. But whatever I did, ford the river, or I didn't know what any of those meant, but I never got it quite right. So we're still today we're having the same debate.
Sure are. We just need some first graders to solve it for us.
Yeah. Maybe that's actually the problem we're in, is first graders of my generation played big long haul trucker and Oregon Trail in school instead of.
Maybe it's that the first graders of a previous generation are still acting like first graders. It's part of it.
Maybe we should all learn our lessons of kindergartners. Like the common perennial meme that you learn everything you need to know in life in kindergarten.
Yeah.
Which is not true. You don't. We're past kindergarten issues this week.
Yeah. Anything that seems to be an oversimplification is.
Oh man, yeah. I need someone else has hopefully invented a word for this, but we need just a one word, not even a sentence, for the kind of topic that is complicated and nuanced, but that you only really get it when you're in it. So there's a million examples, but I'll just give you an example and you can help me think of a word. So you have been diagnosed with two serious illnesses.
Right.
And so most of the people that you interact with, because most people are not, they're kind of novices at how to talk about that, how to deal with that, right? You're an expert with how to react to people, how to like help people react, so like you understand not only scientifically what's going on, but also like emotionally you're doing the work to handle that kind of stuff, but each person comes to the situation and feels like they're confident enough to tell you something about it, probably, if they're anything like me, or they want to comfort you and they feel confident in the way that they can do it. So in other words, it's one of those issues where a huge percentage of the population kind of thinks they know how they would be in that situation, and then prescribes whatever that is that they think they would feel
right
to that. And sorry to bring it, I brought it like personal onto you.
No, that's okay.
But like obviously I think illegal immigration is maybe an example like this of armchair quarterbacking an issue that is pretty complicated and nuanced, and that people who are in it would possibly do the same exact thing that I would do in that situation. But since I'm not in that situation, I just am confident in my black and white solutions to that kind of thing.
Yep.
Here's all we need to do is this,
Well, another example is the one that like this type of thing that just shot into my mind immediately was parenting. Everybody is an expert parent until you're a parent.
Yeah.
It's like when you're in college, somebody's kid screaming at the next table wanting more mac and cheese or whatever. And you're like, if they would just do X, Y, Z with this kid right now, make everybody's lives better. Then you have a kid screaming for mac and cheese, and you're like, I just need to get through the next 5 minutes,
yeah.
You suddenly realize you have no idea. It's like there's no black and white answer, and you suddenly have empathy, and so I think that kind of a reaction to things is it's classic human response. We think we know what's going on until we are in it. And then we really realize that there's a lot more nuance to everything.
Oh, yeah. And I just thought of another one, so that I have a lot of conservative and libertarian streaks in me, the way I was raised and just the way I think. And so I have a lot of friends like that as well, who maybe would be completely against maybe a government handout, or government is a horrible, system to try to solve some of these problems, until you are in one of those where you desperately need it and there's that program available. And I just came this week from that exact situation happening, and someone being like, oh, thank goodness that this is here.
Mm-hmm.
Something they absolutely would have been against in theory and in general.
Yeah.
But in that specific situation, now that they found themselves there, they suddenly got it.
They're thankful for that thing that they would have hated before.
Yeah. Which is just maybe a curse of humanity, that we don't get it until we live it.
Yeah.
Don't judge a person until you walk a mile in their shoes, which is in John chapter 2. Just kidding. That's not the Bible. That's a common, it's like, God only helps those who help themselves.
Shoes are mentioned in the Bible. Judging is, and walking is.
Yeah. It's all there. But, when you zoom into, like, let's say, church abuse scandals, where you're talking about the most sensitive of issues that the few of us have to go through, there's so many strong opinions about it. It's almost like the opinions actually get stronger when I'm not thinking about the individual people as me.
Mm.
It's, I imagine what that group is like.
Mm-hmm.
And it kind of works, the SBC or, Catholic Church, sex abuse scandals are just the two institutions who have structures sound enough to find that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
But it's so easy to imagine the people behind the cover up as kind of caricature evil people.
Yeah.
Which makes it hard to recognize when it's me.
Yep.
And then it's also easy to maybe discredit the people who are making a claim, because I just base it off of my experience. And so I come up with, like, this is the answer to that thing.
Same thing when people look at the Bible. It's like, we are always one of the apostles. We're never the Romans.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We're
never crucifying Jesus. I'll admit, once in a while, I'm like, I kind of want to, like, deny Jesus type of thing, but I'm not crucifying. I'm not that bad.
Yeah.
Which is a huge problem for, at least I think it's always been a problem, but we always think that other people have messed up worse than we have, or I don't know, we're the good guys.
Yeah.
It's a similar situation, I think.
Yeah, exactly. And we're the good guys. The bad guys are, unrepentantly evil to their core. Their intentions are evil. They're not being honest about their intentions. That's a huge one. Some supervillain can come up with a gas that gets people to stop guessing what people's intentions are. Political discourse in America would be 30% more civil.
Oh yeah.
Because the week that we just had, but every week before that in American politics, is liberals actually want to destroy your country. It's like, have you ever heard a liberal say that? Oh, I want to destroy America. That's the step one is, social welfare. Step two is watch America crumble. Step three is the party afterwards. Cause and it, that there was so much going on, this week, mostly like what is evangelical Christianity, conservative America up to? and people were saying like that what they actually want is this. I was like, nobody has said that. I've never heard an evangelical say that, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've got like, I kind of want to just jump right into it, but
Go for it. Yeah.
I have it makes me so nervous because I'm so reluctant to share a lot of my opinions when they're like on these kinds of issues, but I have very strong opinions on most issues. Like I'm a very opinionated person who is afraid of sharing my opinion, which if you know my mom and my dad, it would make sense because that's what you would get if you mix up those two people.
Oh, that's so true.
So it's a horrible affliction to have, and I can't shut up. So I do it, and then I feel bad.
You could be talking about a friend of yours.
Yeah, it's a friend. So a friend of mine has got these ideas.
Asking for a friend.
I just feel like I should share to the rest of the world. But another reason is it's so easy to imagine, like once I have settled on my opinion, I start to imagine the opposite opinion as more and more stupid. Like as soon as I've settled on it, and even as soon as I say it out loud, now I kind of have some stake in the game to defend that position.
Yeah.
And there's weird things happens with the culture around me where, okay, I have my positions and I look around and there's some people clumped near me ideologically.
Yep.
And we have, we overlap 80% in our stuff, but, a lot of them have some other thing in common that they all agree on. And, I just haven't thought about very much, but I hear them talk about it and I just kind of adopt that into my belief system. Like, okay, yeah,
right.
I'm done with that. And then eventually maybe that group that, I have a lot in common with, but kind of the other things I've just absorbed from them, they'll start to say like, oh man, can you believe this person, how wrong they are? And I'll be like, man, that's like a little bit like me. I don't want to be, suddenly I'm like in a group and I want to stay in the group. I'm like, man, so it's so hard to not have an opinion, say it out loud, and then start becoming like the whatever group I'm in, like the ideal human, and expressing the things I'm supposed to express and hating the people I'm supposed to hate. It happens like automatically. You didn't even think about it.
No.
Yeah. It's deep in my brain for one. It's like, this is how humans get along in society probably is.
Yeah. I mean, the drive to fit in with the people you're around, it's like way back a long time ago, there was literally a matter of survival. If you were abrasive and annoying and ticked off everybody in your tribe, they may not give you food.
Right. Yeah.
When the hunting party goes out. I was in Oklahoma for the 4th, and I don't know what's going on with the kids these days, but tons of young, high school age girls walking around in sweatshirts in Oklahoma in July. It's like 98 degrees and 98% humidity. Sweatshirts and biking short, like spandex shorts that and the sweatshirt goes just below.
So it looks like they're just wearing a sweatshirt.
Kind of, yeah. And I'm like, but they're all I saw this flock of girls going to this store, and they all looked exactly the same. It made me think of the kind of in my high school time, it was like the goth kids. They're like, I don't want to be like anybody else, and they all looked like each other. Yeah. So they absorbed into the new subculture. Right. And so that happens with us. We find a new group, or the group we're already in has certain opinions, and the more opinions that they have that are like that, or even the way they dress, or the kind of cars they drive, you wake up one day and you look at yourself and you're like, I am like everybody around me.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And it just happens.
Yeah. And there are so many, I bet almost everything about that is beneficial. Almost the things that we don't notice we're mirroring each other. We're like, that makes everybody happy. It's more fun, or the stories feel more engaging.
It's beneficial in a world where you don't encounter anybody else.
Yeah. Where there's, you mean like an outsider that's not like your group?
Yeah, when you don't encounter any other outsiders or any other tribes, it makes a lot of sense. But we have this world now where I instantly can connect with anybody in the world, and they are not like me. And so my instinct to be like those people around me in my subgroup can really bite me in the backside when I need to have a connection with somebody in Australia or Germany or whatever.
Yeah. Yeah. There's almost, so we're almost doubly cursed because when we were all in one, little village having to get along, there was probably a bell curve of how easy it was to get to fit in.
Yeah.
Right. And most people would never even notice a difference. And some people notice a little bit of a difference, and some people it's really uncomfortable. Like they really, really, really have to work hard. So on the one hand, we have internet communities now where everybody can find their direct middle of their bell curve and be in that community.
Yeah.
Which is fantastic. There's other people like me that think this way, and that feels really good, especially if you would have otherwise been one of those people on the outskirts, trying really hard to fit in or rejecting that, but kind of being alone.
Yeah.
But those internet subgroups kind of make us feel like the world, it still feels like a village to us. It still feels like this is what the world is. And now when you encounter somebody, you're going to encounter them actually more likely in real life, because like at the grocery store, it's not all the people I follow on Twitter. It's just like all the people in my zip code. And now they seem like completely foreign and alien to you. And the groups are so much tighter. That bell curve shape is taller but narrower. And so in certain aspects of the group, the expectation to conform is extremely strong.
Right.
And it starts to feel so safe that it's kind of like, have I admitted this out loud? I've participated in like Republican conventions where like you close the doors and it's just nominated Republicans voting on Republican issues.
Yeah.
I kind of imagine social media like what happens if a bunch of people have been in that room for months and months and months talking about the things that they care about, and then someone runs in with BLM on their shirt and starts arguing, right? It would not go over very well. It's like
right.
You're not where's this coming from? You're not, that kind of thing.
Sitting here staring at the sky, same way I've done a million times before. In this vast sea of dark, all I see is light.
Okay, anyways, all of that to say, I've noticed a lot. I was going to share my opinions, and I'm weaseling out of it by just talking about the nature of opinions instead. I've noticed a lot where I have found this amazing online community that I am extremely grateful for. The podcast is a huge part of that for me, and the podcast Facebook group, but just people I follow on Twitter and Instagram, that Instantgram that they have now. It's like right away, little, what does gram come from? Like Telegram. Is that it?
I think so.
What does gram mean though? Okay. Sorry. This is me escaping what I know is that there's a monster at the end of this rant, which is I'm going to share my political opinions. It's just so great to see people who are going through things that I go through, or have pain that I have, or have passions that I have. And it's felt so good. And then the last 3 weeks, I and this happens a little bit all the time, but I watched as my community kind of congeals around orthodoxy.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes I'm right in the middle, so I don't really notice, but sometimes like suddenly I'm like, wait, I do share all of the things that I share with these people, and now I disagree about this thing. And it's a very strange feeling. And I think that feeling of being on the outside of your political group is extremely important if you're not feeling that you're following the group that you're in, and that may be fine 95% of the time. But
that's a good point.
I've never been part of a company or a group or a family that's right 100% of the time.
Yeah, it's almost like if you think that everybody's right in your group all the time, you maybe should like back up a bit.
Yeah. And it happens so quickly because most of the people that I follow are ex-evangelical or deconstructing, or they're in that weird space. Like almost everyone started evangelical and is something weird now.
Yeah.
And so they know what that feeling is. Like the thing that we got away from was this group think that leads people kind of away from Christ. Maybe that's not what everyone thought, but that's a big piece of a lot of people's deconstruction.
Yeah.
And then we're so used to that, exercising that muscle though, that now in this new situation, we just congealed and made our own. We didn't know it, but we made our own little orthodoxy again of like, now this is what we're for and this is what we're against. I remember the early months of Twitter for me were realizing which people I followed that I'm not allowed to like because other people were saying, can you believe this person? They're the worst. And I was like, you know what? Like John Piper, he's got these great...
I just follow him for research.
Yeah. No, I've got these great books. I was like, oh, John Piper is on Twitter. He's alive. Yeah. Fantastic. And then learned like, oh, he is persona non grata my group has brainwashed me to believe that he deserves to be persona non grata, but I would never have I could have read his books. I don't listen to like his speeches or anything, so I don't know.
Right.
If I had read his works and judged him by his works, I would have been like, this guy's great. Read his books. And maybe, it's been a while since I've read a John Piper book, but it's just an interesting feeling though, it's kind of like out of the frying pan and into the fire a little bit, or into a different frying pan feeling.
Oh yeah.
So I'll dive in now. I'll just do it. So
rip off the Band-Aid, dude.
So there was there was January 6th committee stuff.
Yeah.
There was the Supreme Court ruled on kind of loosening the ability for states to regulate guns at all, which felt like
the concealed carry thing.
The concealed carry thing, that felt like a huge monumental decision just because it was so broad and such an old law for about 2 days. Then we had the ruling where Roe versus Wade was overruled. January 6th stuff. What else?
There's a ruling about native lands. People.
That's right.
Through Oklahoma, that states are allowed to prosecute things that happen on native lands now.
Yeah, which is another huge deal because those, for a very long time, those territories have been thought of as sovereign nations. There was a ruling about prayer in school, all kinds of things. And the Roe versus Wade one is the one where I think that's the issue the most, like what I was describing at the beginning, where there's a whole bunch of people trying to use a very blunt instrument called the law to deal with some really nuanced, sensitive things that we're not all going through.
Mm-hmm.
But that when you go through it, it's very likely that your perspective would be more nuanced than if you're on the outside, if you are unimpacted. And I've seen so much discourse that is speaking for those people, what the black and white law of the U.S. should be.
Yeah.
On something that feels so very complicated.
Yeah.
And I grew up with drinking the Kool-Aid that this one issue was the most important issue for Christians in America. Political issue. The most important political issue was abortion.
Right.
I wore the shirt that said, have I told the story about wearing my First Amendment shirt to high school?
No. I'm glad I'm not the only one who wore an offensive shirt.
Yeah. No. Man, I have this story that I've been so proud of for so long until, I revisited the story as an adult.
Yeah.
So there should be like trigger warnings in front of this whole thing. But I was president of the Young Republicans Club in high school. I had been listening to Rush Limbaugh since I was in 5th grade, which is early. I mean, maybe that's normal.
Yeah.
Maybe
that was me too.
Anyways, Northern Colorado at that time felt to me like a very liberal place, inhospitable to Christianity, which, was not necessarily an accurate depiction, but I felt like the kind of rogue outsider standing up for my values. I had a really liberal English teacher that felt like it was her job to shake up kind of our values and challenge those. And we never really saw eye to eye, but she had this idea that someone got kicked out of school for wearing a political t-shirt. And she said, we should organize a day where we all wear like our First Amendment shirt, protect our freedom of speech. And like, what's the issue? You choose it. So I made my own shirt.
Really?
Like with the, back in the day, printable, at home printable.
Like iron on?
Iron on. Yep.
Okay.
But from your own printer.
Yeah.
So I bought that paper, and it said in like stencil letters, it looked like spray paint stencil, abortion is, and then in red, homicide was the front. And the back said, I thought this was really clever. It said like, 2,500 Americans have been killed by terrorism since 1970. 2,500 Americans have been killed by abortion since yesterday.
Yeah. Well.
And then I just felt just full of righteousness as I walked around school, and I went into my French class, and my French teacher, she turned beet red and was shaking, and I interpreted that as like, liberal snowflake rage.
Mm-hmm.
And I was proud of it, like, doing its thing. My shirt is
working.
working.
Owned the lib.
I owned a lib, but this was before this was the Bush era.
Right.
We weren't owning libs back then. And probably in retrospect, she has had an abortion and I brought a traumatic experience into her classroom with the clumsiness of a 15-year-old high school boy. Which seems to be where the debate level is still hovering. Man, so anyways, passionately pro-life for most of my life. And then it might have been a decade ago.
Yeah.
I have to think about when I started I went to school for political science. I didn't finish school for political science, but I was very politically minded and still am. And I started to see kind of the difference between people who want to reduce how many people need an abortion versus people who just want to make it illegal.
Right.
Kind of like, how do you reduce illegal immigration versus how do you make it more harsh and illegal? And so coming into this month, I'm a weird pro-choice, pro-life person that doesn't really fit in the middle anywhere, and kind of the, like every debate I've ever heard about late-term abortion, I think, that happens so rarely that maybe women and doctors should, I have no idea what would cause someone to go. Have you heard women? This turned into a podcast about men talking about abortion. So I was specifically a few weeks ago, I was like, man, we should be careful about.
You're allowed to talk about your own feelings. That's okay.
Yeah. I was going to launch into like, man, pregnant women complain about being pregnant when they're 8 months pregnant. Like they're not having fun at that point. And so making the decision to terminate that far along, almost by definition means like, well, wow, there must be something serious and nuanced and complicated or dangerous or scary or whatever going on. And maybe, Ken Buck doesn't have the solution to that in the legislature. And then I started imagining like, what if we voted on, can you remove someone's appendix? I'm not saying those things are the same, but but what if people had a say in what procedures should be allowed and should not be allowed? It would be so easy to convey some procedures that are kind of like, you can be amputated in a hospital in America. That should be illegal, shouldn't it? Doctors shouldn't be able to cut off someone's limb, a whole body. They should be fighting to protect that limb. I am pro limb, and I would vote clumsily, and a doctor would be like, I don't know anything about medicine, so I'm going to pretend like gangrene is, we had to do this thing that nobody wanted to do, least of all the patient.
To keep you alive.
Yeah. Or, this feels like it's starting to happen more. Maybe it's not, but what can you teach at a university than what can you teach in, high school, and what can you teach in elementary school? And the more we make extreme examples the thing that motivates people to vote, the worse our policies are going to be.
Say that one more time.
So the more we use extreme examples, extreme outliers to fire up the base around some issue, the more clumsy our legislation is going to be. Absolutely. There may be no more egregious example than this than like legislation about trans youth issues. Yeah. I want to say it was Wyoming a couple of years ago, or maybe this year, where if you looked at the percentage of people who are impacted by a law like this, rounds to zero, like the actual individuals themselves, versus like how much money is being poured into this and how much rage and how many people have opinions on this thing. Yeah.
Well, in Utah, they made a law this year about transgender kids in sports.
That's the one I was thinking.
And there was one person in the entire state, literally one person.
That's exactly what I mean. Yeah. Where like, man, I just saw a mouse in my backyard and I have 2 pebbles here, or I could light my backyard on fire. And it seems like we're taking our nuclear arsenal out to tackle these issues that like, could you have maybe you couldn't, but could you have a huddle with the parents in that one school? Yeah. Like if people were talking face to face with like mom and dad, could they come to some kind of an agreement? Like I think not every school, I mean, school boards are getting political these days, but that seems like the appropriate size and scale of how to deal with something like that. Mm-hmm. Yeah. But extreme examples fire up the base. Oh yeah. Man, that made me think of, right. Like, so it's a good practice to like switch your television channel, if people still do that, to the other guys, listen to like someone else's campaign and then imagine that it was like your side. So I see this a lot with like, we have some crazy Congress people that are in the news all the time. MTG, Marjorie Taylor Greene, is just a crazy individual. And who does not represent, on the bell curve, she is the super sharp, pointy end of pointing out far right. Right. I mean, it's serious that she's been elected, so that's a big deal. But what a liberal will do is take what she says and project that, say like that is everybody.
Mm-hmm.
right? What a conservative will do is take AOC, like we reduce them even down to their initials, Alexandria
Ocasio-Cortez.
Ocasio-Cortez, and say, look what she just said. This is all liberals. And then they raise a bunch of money. And both of those people's faces are plastered on like political campaign ads that you get.
Yeah.
When we talk about abortion, the narrative tends to be extreme examples.
Mm-hmm.
And we almost never talk about it feels like it's left and right, but on the pro-choice side, it's kind of against the orthodoxy to talk about that it could be a difficult decision, or that you could feel trauma afterwards, or that it's not like a liberation thing, but it's a difficult, It used to be in the Clinton days, safe, legal, and rare. And now it's kind of like celebrated and it's nothing. And, that's flattening the issue.
Right.
On the pro-life side, we think about partiers who are just, living a life of sin with no consequences, or these extreme, like late term abortions, or
mm-hmm.
we just inject evil into those people.
Yep.
It's almost like the left injects virtue into people who have abortions, and the right injects evil into people who have abortions.
You're saying that it's more nuanced than that?
It seems like it might be more nuanced than that, but like nuance does not get you in power.
Yeah, right.
Can you imagine the nuance party? They throw the lamest parties. Yeah.
Their slogan is, well,
yeah, it depends. Pick a side, and no matter how wrong you are, and stick with it. Our ties will be gray. I would love the nuance party. And the party line is that you're only allowed to tackle boring issues, and if it's exciting, then you're doing it wrong. That's exciting issues.
I can get behind
Hollywood.
that.
It's boring issues only. But yeah, and so extremes, kind of like the MTG versus AOC, or the imaginary abortion versus the imaginary. We're imagining fake people when we think about these issues, and we're imagining false situations. But it's a dehumanizing thing that turns the issue into, takes it away from humanity and turns it into issues and policies, and it turns the opposition into an enemy.
That's the key term right there, is dehumanizing. Because all the phrases that people use, the pejorative terms, that even like the first one popped in my mind, it's like the rhino thing, the Republicans in name only. Republicans have even, like extreme Republicans have pejorative terms for Republicans who are not quite as extreme as them. And I mean, it's all over. Everybody does that kind of stuff to some extent, but you're right. It's dehumanizing, because it turns all these people who are doing a thing or interested in a thing or whatever into a target you can throw a dart on at the wall.
Yeah,
and then you feel good about that because I threw a dart at a bad guy, and not that her name is Alexandria, not AOC.
AOC. Yeah,
she has a name and she has a life, or. Like the one kid in Utah, one trans kid, they're just like, they just want to like play tennis or whatever it was. I forget what it was. Just let the kid play tennis. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, and that's not to say, like, we have gone through, and I have been vocal about the fact that there are some issues here where both sides are not equal. Morally or logically, right, or anything mm-hmm. like that. But so it's hard. I'm a little bit allergic to both-sides-ism, and I always want to add the caveat, but both parties use extreme examples to drive votes and to stay in power. The you go into churches, and there are churches where you will notice the same thing. And when we have these debates, you don't have to argue on the terms that the people around you set.
Right.
There's not a circle that's 50-50 split into pro-life and pro-choice. And people like me who are neither don't even have the word to say, well, I'm pro-life, pro-choice. I'm pro-choice life. I'm I'm for a lot of things that I'm just not against as many things as you guys want me to be against.
Mm-hmm.
And so the issue of the day will roll up, and I used to track this. I used to get a magazine, the Week magazine. Highly recommend it. It's great. It summarizes the news. And there's always a controversy of the week. And sometimes the controversies are more, more serious, more impactful than others. But we all get fired up about it and argue from extreme side A against extreme side B. And we form our sides, and people ask, pollsters say, which side are you on? Yeah. And then we move on to the next thing until it flares up again. And, my opinion is mostly directed then after all of that towards Christians and the church. And so when I think about these things, who cares what the government does? I think we are called to love the other, even if we think they're doing something that we disagree with.
Yeah.
Which I think that we are called to give up power, not strive for power, which is the opposite of political discourse in America.
Yeah.
We're supposed to love our neighbor and do good to those who mistreat us, but it feels so good, especially when we're rewarded by the people around us, to do bad to the people who mistreat us and to hate our enemies. It feels good, and our tribes reward that. Like, that gets you more in the center of the tribe. Just saying, like, I hate AOC gets me brownie points with conservatives. Right? I don't have to be for anything. I can just be against all the right things.
Yeah.
Yeah. Jesus didn't come to make America great again. He came to, like, wash people's feet next to him and make people who were on the outside of their communities feel like they were on the inside of a community.
Yeah.
And he was notorious for jumping around the issue of the day. And they asked him, which is so frustrating because Republicans and Democrats both are fully confident that Jesus would support their things,
right,
and their candidates. And Jesus would not. The frustrating thing is that if we got to poll Jesus, he would give some smart aleck answer that doesn't answer the question and makes us have to look inside ourselves. And we'd be like, Jesus, come on, this one's easy.
Pick a side.
Yeah. I'm saying temple or Caesar. And he's like, well,
Right.
Who do you belong to, and are you doing that? And, who cares about the money thing? So, no, Jesus, the answer was the temple.
Right.
That's more important. And we're against Caesar. And I think Jesus would support all of the things that I agree with. So I mostly am talking to all of you who are wrong. And Jesus would answer all of my questions directly and say, yes, Nathan, you're right. Thanks for asking. Right. Write it down.
Will I know who I was? Be still and know I fight for you. I am your God. I'll work through you.
So I'll jump in with another thing, which is where we're going. I saw a lot of great talk about, okay, church, Christians have been a strongly and powerful group, a strong and powerful group in American politics, kind of like the NRA, in that we have been more powerful than our numbers.
Yeah.
In this one issue, because we were single issue voters for, 2 decades. around abortion.
Right.
And Christians have gotten something that I keep generalizing people, but this movement has kind of gotten what it wanted. And now if you look at the bell curve of that movement, you see some people who are saying more further, right, onto the states, onto the, until we've every last spot. And that is, first of all, that is, all of those people are well-intentioned and think they're saving lives. And, it's frustrating, but none of them are trying to destroy America or they think they're doing the opposite. But many people in the middle are kind of like, okay, now we live in this place. So now the church should be stepping up and adopting and giving money to crisis pregnancy centers, which is true and correct. But here's my fear. And so Christians who are pro-life, earnestly at the core of your being, write this down. As soon as we make something illegal, it's easy to start thinking about the people who do that thing as criminals.
Mm-hmm.
And as soon as we think about people who do things that are illegal and that they're criminals, we absolve ourselves of the responsibility to care about them. In fact, we even have a little bit of an incentive to set ourselves against them. So you can see this with illegal immigration, where we reduce down people and say they're breaking the law, and we stop and we don't have to think about how hard what they're doing must be and how they must feel and what would I do in that situation. And it's a very human and complicated thing that's a lot different than, I don't know, I think we imagine criminals like Joker and his crew from Batman or something. Like they're just criminals all the way down. But watch out for politicians or conservatives or Christians who start to have tones that suggest that the women who are in these situations deserve to be in those situations and deserve bad things to happen to them because they're breaking the law. And Jesus, this isn't a one-to-one comparison, but one of the scariest parts of the Bible, if you believe in a literal heaven and hell and judgment, is when Jesus separates the sheep from the goats. And both groups are surprised. And the difference is not, did you claim to be a Christian, or did you claim Jesus as your Lord, or were you fully submersed in a water baptism, or did you?
Right. With the right words said.
None of that is in there. Everybody is surprised because Jesus says, when I was hungry, you fed me. When I was sick, you took care of me. When I was in prison, you came and visited me.
What did you do?
What did you do? And they're like, what are you talking about? We didn't ever see you in those things. And he says, whatever you do for the least of these, you do for me. And the least of these are illegal immigrants. They're trans youth. They're women who are considering abortion or who have had abortions. The least of these are all around us. And some of them happen to be political issues occasionally.
Mm-hmm.
Some of them are difficult for us in our churches to square with our theology, but those are not excuses to not still care for those people and love those people and see them as human. And so the call of Jesus is to humanize radically, and the call of culture is to dehumanize. And you can be the most progressive or the most conservative or somewhere in between. And it's so easy to dehumanize opponents or specific political people or these issues, not to mention like people who live in China, or people who live in Russia, or people who are farther and farther from my tribe that I consider the most human. Wherever the church lands on what policy issues should be implemented, we should always be injecting humanity into those policies, into those debates. What we do and how we do it should be full of recognizing the humanity of all of the people, including and especially focusing on the people at the very bottom.
Yeah. I mean, everything you're saying is nothing is surprising about it. It's like how it's how people function. That doesn't make it any less frustrating.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
So, I'm not dissing on you saying I'm not surprised, but it's like it just keeps happening this way, and because we're humans, and I'll be honest, the past few weeks I've felt pretty what's the word, that's discouraged, I guess is the word. Pretty discouraged about the United States in general. Not only because I feel like there are freedoms that are being removed, and I'm not liking some of the direction that things seem to be going in general, but also because, laws aside, Supreme Court decisions aside, nothing can be said, nothing can be even hinted at without somebody blowing up and othering you and turning you into, or turning a group of people into a caricature and dehumanizing everybody. And when we embrace this difference that we have, this othering, when we embrace that separatist reaction, then there's not a lot of hope. I mean, we are ostensibly the United States, and we are moving further and further from that, and that's just a hard place to live. I am, like, I'll be honest, the 4th, when we're in Oklahoma, and part of it is I didn't really feel like getting out in the heat, but we also, my family, we're just not feeling it. We're just not feeling the patriotism. Not only because, like, my family, as in the folks who live in this house, we're very pro-choice now. I haven't always been that way. Not only because of that, but this everything. It's like, it's just depressing to celebrate a country that's just tearing itself apart, and that's why I'm trying to also not focus on the abortion thing or the other things that happen with the court. But I think no matter what the rulings are, there's always some explosion and some hate being thrown at each other. And I mean, I am one of those people who I've been pretty vocal about some stuff, especially on the Facebooks, which makes everybody happy.
Facebook.
Yeah, but I don't know, man. It's just so frustrating because the reason I've been discouraged, but back to that, the reason I've been discouraged is I see that all this happening and I don't see anything changing. Nothing is changing. We look back at 1,000 years ago and people were treating each other like this back then. And the depressing, discouraging thing is it hasn't, as long as humanity has been around, this has been happening. And I don't see it getting any better. And at least before the internet, I had the comfort of ignorance, thinking, everybody's pretty nice. Not everybody thought like everybody else, but they're at least nice to each other, right? Like if they saw a person on the side of the road, like maybe a Samaritan perhaps, anybody would stop and help that guy. They clearly need help. But then you see people who, like, right out would say, no, I would actually probably run over him a little bit more with my truck. And I'm definitely not stopping, but I will make it worse. And people, people coming out and saying that, then suddenly it's like this, this cotton candy world that I had in my head as a kid just gets worse and more splintered and becomes just this fantasy. And I've seen it with my kids. I'm 46 and I've hit this wall of, like, why try? You know, I'm laughing so I don't cry. You know, it's like
Man,
but my kids, my son is 15, and we were in Oklahoma. We were just sitting around, like flipping around our phones because we were trying to relax or whatever. And he just got up and he sighed and he just went back into the bedroom. I'm like, what's going on with Noah? And Hannah said, oh, well, he's been reading the news.
Yeah.
And he's 15 and he's already defeated. And I'm like, what's wrong? But he's like, well, if we even live another decade, if this country is even around next year, you know, that kind of thing. And that's hard to hear from your kid.
Man, a few weeks ago, this was going to be the topic of the podcast, and maybe we can do this in a future time, which is like living in Babylon. So we can maybe pick that up next time. But I felt the same thing. So that I'm not as, you know, I'm very middly on pro-life, pro-choice stuff. Even like gun stuff, I've kind of started to dissociate myself away from. It's like, yeah, great, you know, we live in that country. That's just the country we live in, and it's. I think the bleakness that I felt is that I'm losing hope in what is the thing that's going to reconcile this country. And you maybe experienced this. Did you drive to Oklahoma from Colorado?
Yeah.
Okay. Did you have little sensors going up when you stopped for gas about what the people around you thought and what they might think you? What car did you drive? Like some kind of a liberal car?
A bright orange Subaru.
Yeah, Crosstrek. Okay. So yeah, you're like sticking out like a sore thumb. Did you feel that? Did you feel like I'm in enemy territory at any point in the trip? With strangers, not with people you know?
In the car I didn't, because, you know, lots of Subarus on the road.
Because you have a bunch of guns in there, did you say?
No, I don't. Well, I don't have any like liberal stickers on my car.
Okay.
You know, I don't have like a rainbow flag or whatever.
You might as well. It's a Subaru.
But and we even have like a couple church stickers on there, like camp stickers and stuff like that.
Okay.
So
okay.
But honestly, though, stopping in some of these small towns in Kansas, where like all along the road on the way to the gas station, it's like massive Trump flags and
yeah,
like "Let's go Brandon" stickers everywhere, and you know, going. I was like, eh. And when we went inside, because you know my health, we all wore masks when we went to the gas station. Or like to the restaurant to grab a bite or something.
Yeah.
That's when I got looks. And I'm like, I'm just waiting for someone to say something stupid.
Yeah.
But there were enough, the places we stopped where there were enough other travelers that there were other people wearing masks too and everything. But Oklahoma, though, in Oklahoma, I did not feel safe. A lot of places. Because one day I wore my Free Dad Hugs Pride shirt with like the rainbow flag and the trans flag on it and stuff. You know, and I got some looks, of course, but one person said, "Hey, I really like your shirt." But they're like,
they're living they're living on the outside of that bell curve where they feel like that. Yeah. So that's a new feeling though, isn't it? Like,
yeah. Mm-hmm. I felt like it didn't belong.
I've been to, you know, when I was conservative, I've been to New York and Seattle, and, you know, I never felt like, oh no. And I spent a few years living abroad where the way that maybe we're feeling about like far right MAGA Trump people is just how the world has always thought about all Americans.
It is.
For a long time, you know. And so, but even there, I never felt, I mean, you feel it sometimes, like they know I'm an American. What are they going to think about me? Or will they, you know, are they treating me this way because I'm an American? And do I deserve it? But so my wife is working in a blue collar job in rural America. And when I go there, I have my senses are tingling, and I'm like, are they going to find out how liberal I am?
Yeah.
Are they, these people hate me, and I don't have a single conversation with anyone. I just see if you've got a fishing hook bent around a beat up hat, if you've got a lifted truck, if there's no draft beer in your bar, then I'm just a sitting duck, and I feel that, right? And I've seriously, I'm like, are these people going to like realize and turn on me?
Yeah.
And then in progressive America, which for me mostly happens online, I have a similar feeling, which is like, are they going to realize how conservative I am under this? Like, are they going to realize that and turn on me? Like, am I going to be the focus of the ire? And ironically, like, nobody is doing the bad thing to me. Like, no one said like, hey, you liberal, you get out of here. But I imagine it 100 times in my head. And just if there are other people like me that have that same radar going up, that just is going to drive our country further and further apart.
Yeah.
So I think part of I've had a couple of wake-up calls with that, but part of the bleak feeling is maybe a little bit of a mourning process that this idea of the country that I love, this United States where we can, September 11th, I grew up with September 11th was a pretty significant, that was the
moment.
That was the before and after until Trump for me. And the country was very divided before that, very divided, with an election that was decided by the Supreme Court.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
And then not my president, right, happening. That was maybe the beginning of precursor to where we are now. And September 11th happened, and it didn't matter that it happened in liberal New York City. Rural Kentucky is sending blood donations, and firefighters from Kansas are sending their best. And there's flags on the highway, and people liked it. That's back when you saw an American flag and you didn't, get scared.
Right.
Like, when we must have made a wrong turn. There's a lot of American flags out on trucks, but
so sad but true.
We had our opportunity with COVID. That was the tragedy that is a universalizing thing that brings us all together, and we didn't.
Yep.
And it's pretty hard to imagine something worse than that. And really, it would have to be like China bombs us.
Yeah.
Where there's a distinct enemy for us to all hate together, because it's not enough for us to love each other. That we got to have an enemy. So the feeling of like, what if this is just what it's going to be like? And the thing I'm trying to challenge myself is, there are countries where this is how it's always been. And there are periods of history where this is how it's always been. And we were extremely lucky to have lived through part of global history where we had a unified feeling country where we didn't have those feelings. But there are so many ways to bring light and to continue to help people on the outside or whatever. If the country falls apart, or if there is this division, there's ways to be Christ followers in that.
Yeah.
You don't have to fix the country to do any of that.
And that's what I would like. I think it's a good takeaway from all this sadness, because there always has been problems. There always will be problems, as history has established. But I'm just thinking, it's almost like there's a set amount of tragedy and pain that humanity has to deal with. It's like always about the same amount, like hovering above us. But the contents of that cloud are always shifting. Back in the 1200s in England or whatever, The concern was, am I going to die because I scraped myself on the saw today? And is my wife going to die because she's giving birth? Lots of heavy things. And I mean, even in up through the 1800s, a lot of people didn't name their children until they're a few days old because they didn't want to have that. I mean, in my family Bible that we have, there's like several, infant baby boy, or just baby boy Martin was the name in there.
Yeah.
So, I mean, things have been worse in some ways, for sure,
For sure. Yeah. Yeah. In almost all ways, things have been worse. In almost every category, it's been worse than it is now.
Right. And so in some ways we're kind of spoiled. I mean, I'm speaking to you. You're on the other side of town. You're like a 20-minute drive away, but we are speaking instantly through space. And my background is literally a picture of one of the James Webb things that just came out, like of the nebula. It's like billions of miles away. And, and I've got a bright orange car and a bright blue car. And I can go get a milk. It's like, obviously, things are not as bad as they have been.
Yeah.
But that doesn't mean that things are not great, or that the things are great, and that the things that we're dealing with are still painful and difficult. But through all those times, when things have been worse, we've been able to come together and try to help each other. And we can still do that now, and we can still try to follow God through the wilderness as much as we can. But it's just keeping the focus is really, really hard.
The holes in my shoes tell the distance that I've come. I feel the same, but I know that I've been changed. Be still and know I fight for you.
Here's the next controversial take. Feel free to take me out of context, people, but I think the civil rights movement did us a pretty big disservice in how, especially how we taught kids. And I don't know, can't speak for every American school child in public school, but here's how I was taught American history, especially through the lens of the civil rights movement. It was, America has been this experiment that has gotten progressively better.
Mm-hmm.
And now we did it.
We fixed it.
We fixed it. But when there were these problems, it was the image of my head for how to fix the problem is like a hippie with a megaphone, like, blasting her message into the ear of a cop. And that, I'm not necessarily against that. I bought a pair of tactical goggles because I was like, you know what, if I'm going to get mixed up in some riding, I want to keep my eyesight and I don't want to lose an eye to it. So,
Yeah.
So I'm not a pacifist in my theoretical imagined mind of things I would support, but then now I'm a Christian, and I'm all of these cultural stories that we tell ourselves seep into what I think the solution is. And so I think a thing that I want to learn myself and then pass on to my son is there are going to be these problems, and the solution is never to create an enemy or to hate an enemy. Like, you can solve any problem on earth without, like, you can be for things more than you're against the people who are against the thing you're for. Be more for the thing than against the people, on the other side.
Right.
But another controversial opinion I have is that democracy is not virtuous, and that there's kind of a false, right now, conservative America is guilty of believing that, like, the founders have this virtue, right? Or that America is like this virtuous place. That's not true.
The Constitution is inspired by God.
Yeah, that was, yeah. It's not true. That's they have placed maybe more virtue in that thing than it deserves, and as a result, it's hard. are less likely to criticize the thing as a whole or whatever. And liberals have done the same thing with democracy. So so a conservative will say, that prayer is the answer. What we need to do is just pray, or like love. People need to turn to Jesus. Or let's get back to the Constitution and get back to the founders. But it's something like that. It's like, trust this thing that will do it. And a liberal will say, like, just let the people vote. Just like the people. But like, people like hot dogs, and people like Crocs, and people bought PT Cruisers. Like, people don't always make good decisions.
I'm fascinated by your choice of.
Yeah. If you've ever been to
a PT Cruiser, eating a hot dog, wearing Crocs.
If you've ever been to a pawn shop, you know that like people on average don't make good decisions. And but there's this belief like, no, like let the people vote, and they'll solve all the problems. But if we forced all people in America to vote on every issue, we would not end up with the perfect society. We would end up with I'm not a strong believer in there's not an intrinsic good thing that happens just because the majority of people support it.
Right.
I have found it to actually be the opposite, that most people like regular coffee, and I know that they're wrong. And the average person, yeah, I'm an elitist, I think. And again, politically, I'm all for. I want it to be as easy as possible for as many people to vote in America.
Right.
But theologically, I understand that like democracy is not the way that. Sorry, theologically, I believe. This is now into just my belief system. I don't believe that that's the answer to anything. And it's useful sometimes, just like a Kleenex is useful sometimes, but it's not the solution to everything.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's going to go the complete wrong direction, and that does not absolve me from doing the right thing. Or you could drop me in a country that has completely different laws than the ones that we have here. And the way that I'm supposed to treat my neighbor is the exact same.
Yep.
Now, the norms change, and the what's polite changes, and what's accepted as helping my neighbor, those things change, but I'm still supposed to love my neighbor. So how do we not get pulled into like myths about the arc of history bends towards justice, and that let the people vote and they'll, then justice will prevail? And how do we stand against, let's just make the laws equal to our moral beliefs? And how can you stand in that middle and believe that your enemy is incorrect, and that what they're doing is harmful, and that they are wrong, and that they should not succeed? And then how do you not turn them then into AOC or MTG?
Boy, if you could answer that one. I mean, the cynical side of me thinks that that's not possible with humanity en masse. I mean,
that's why they shouldn't vote. That's
right. You should have to pass a test. Wait, that's problematic too.
Yeah, that's discriminatory.
Yeah, I mean, I think we're honestly. I mean, this too. But I think we're just kind of bemoaning humanity, really, because even people who try to follow the way of Jesus, try to be loving, they're more important than me. Caring over, love matters more, that kind of stuff. We all still get sucked into this, turning other people into the other, into the reject that we have to Like, forget loving them. We just have to protect ourselves from them because they're dangerous. I mean, it's one of those things that it kind of feels like a cop out to say it, but it's kind of like, you just do what you can in your small world. And I think one of the problems that we have is the curse of knowledge. I mean, it's all over the book of Proverbs and Ecclesiastes. Like, I forget which one is it? It's like those who know much have much. Help me out here.
More money, more problems.
That's part of it.
Much concerns. Okay, now it's like, I don't know. Are we making up the Bible right now?
The more you know, the more worried that you're going to be, basically. The more stress and anxiety you're going to have in your life, the more you know. And even the most uneducated among us is exposed to more of the world than we ever have been. I think way more than the human brain was meant to have the capacity to handle. So it's almost like we have taken the world, and the only way we can possibly manage is to break people into even like we only have so many pigeonholes to put people in. And like the this thing, you can only have like 12 close friends in your life and really only know 150 people or whatever. That's why tribes tend to be about 150 people and then they kind of break up. I think it's the same problem. Our brains just cannot deal with all of the different opinions and ideas and beliefs, and so to survive mentally, we put things into to pigeonholes so we can process it. And the problem is that the pigeonholes become less and less meaningful or useful or even real when we have more things to put in them. You just got to simplify and dehumanize.
Yeah, and the more you do that, the more your map will not actually fit reality.
Right.
When it's one of those pigeonholes.
Yep.
Yeah. There's something that I forget, and I'm reminding myself right now, is that there is no virtue in being more correct than somebody.
Right.
There's not virtue in knowing more things than somebody else, because I interact with the general public, which means that I'm more correct than everybody else all the time. And at work, I know more stuff than most people that I work with.
That's why they contact you.
That's why they need my help about, a very, very small part of the planet. And then it's easy for me I yelled over chat that, at somebody, but they could tell I was not happy.
Yeah.
And it was because they were wrong and I was right, and they were doing a thing and they were so wrong that they deserved to hear what my anger. Yeah. And you knowing stuff, it's definitely not proportional to your capacity to love, and it might be inversely proportional to your capacity to love. In my experience, it is, because I'll think of myself higher and higher and higher, and think of other people as lower and lower and lower, and the lower that I put them and the higher that I am, the more. And with like you said, like the chimpanzee psychology size, where you can only hold 100 people in your brain or 20 people in your brain, and the rest you have to, like, you're going to care about less, right? That's why when we hear that 100,000 people died in a tsunami or 10 people died in a school shooting, we feel more sad about the 10 people who died in the school shooting, even though it's more sad that 100,000 people died, because we can't process it.
Right.
We can't process that 1 million people died of COVID in the U.S. We can process my friend died of COVID.
Right.
That is sadder than, So this all kind of wraps together for me in how I think I have misread Romans 12, don't conform to the pattern of the world. I have always kind of read that as your morals should be different than the morals of the world, like your standards, right? So we don't swear. Yeah. And if you expand out, this is about being careful about the patterns that you like are going to happen to you, that your society is going to do, in specific context with not thinking too highly about yourself, and in perspective of the mercy that God has shown us that we didn't deserve. So it's like, starts with, you don't deserve any of this. So here's going to be your living act of worship. And he says, offer your bodies. But then he says, don't follow those patterns. Be transformed by the renewing of your mind. Then you can test and approve of what God's will is, his good, pleasing will. And don't think of yourselves more highly than you ought. And to me, it's not, then you'll know what God's will is, like what policies he supports or what people he would vote for, or like what's wrong and what's right. I really do think that means it's so much smaller than that. Like, our call is to love the people next to us.
Mm-hmm.
And when you reject the way that society is pulling us to hate those people, then it's so much easier to see what the right thing is to do when you're facing that person across from you.
Yeah.
It's very difficult to know what to do about Putin and Ukraine or about some issue.
I think it's one of those, bringing back to the Ukraine thing. All of this is stuff that it's easy to pass judgment on, to be an expert on, and other people push them out and have my righteous opinion until you know somebody in that. Like, I've never liked the what's going on in the Ukraine right now with Russia. I think Russia needs to get out. But it was like, oh, that's a thing happening. And but then I was at church when this is right starting, and one of the guys at church is literally from the Ukraine, from Ukraine, not the Ukraine. He's from Ukraine, and he was just beside himself, distraught. And as we're talking to him, like after church, his mom calls him, or actually he's like, "I'm sorry, I got to call my mom really quick. Our town is getting bombed again." And he gets on the phone, he goes over and talks to his mom for a while, comes back, and he's like, "Yeah, they're okay. The passage got really close, but they're okay." Suddenly, the war in Ukraine meant a lot more to me, because I have this direct line to someone who is living it, and then her son is right standing in front of me, and he's just crying about the whole thing. And suddenly, it meant a lot more. And the same way with any of these issues, with abortion, with LGBTQ people, if you don't know someone who's been through that or who is in that community, it's easy to just assume that you know everything. And with all of those issues, I was extremely against abortion, and I was extremely on the side of, being gay is wrong. You can have the feelings, just don't do anything about it. But until I really got to know some people who were living in those situations, or I got to know some people who their daughters have had abortions, and hearing about how that was not an easy thing, and what would have happened if they had not been able to do that, or, on and on and on. All these things, I think it gets back to what you're saying as far as considering others better than yourself, and loving them. You can't do that if you don't know them. And so it's so easy in America, even though we have all this, not just America, the world, it's so easy in the world to, regardless of the access we have to information, it's easy to, like you said, find our little niche on the internet and just get to know those people, just them. And if we don't force ourselves to do something besides that, we're never going to have true empathy.
The idea of something or the idea of someone is so much easier to fight than an individual person that you know.
Right.
I'll try to make this short, but I recently went to Wyoming, and my uncle is a great person that I look up to. He's helped me in my life, and I know him. And he, he's in Wyoming, so his surroundings are Wyoming,
right?
know?
Very Wyoming.
And so the northern Colorado wheats and 90 miles away the southern Wyoming wheats, had this tiny difference and politically have found ourselves in completely different spots, right?
Yeah.
And we went up to see him, and I found myself arguing with him, and I argued one way argument where he's not just interested and asking questions back, and I was arguing towards him, at him, about issues, and I felt so foolish afterwards, and I realized what I was doing was I was arguing with an imaginary person. I was arguing with the idea of this, like Christian, but Christian nationalist, like all in for Trump, extremist kind of person that, exists. But
even though he was right there talking to you.
But the person talking to me is not that person.
Right.
But I'm scared of those people, and I'm allowed to vent with this guy. So I argued against an imaginary person with a real person, which I think is, that's Facebook comments in a nutshell.
Yeah.
But the kind of, to circle back to that feeling where like, I now, when I physically move around the country, I have this feeling of, I'm nervous, and I feel safe when I can tell that I'm in a safe spot with the progressives, I guess. I'm a liberal now, I guess. and I feel like in danger when I'm in rural America or like obviously conservative spots. And as I was thinking this thing, because I drove with my family to Utah and then to this part of Colorado where Amy Boebert, is her first name Boebert?
Oh.
Crazy.
Laura
Second
Boebert.
in command below MTG is Boebert. It's her region, and her signs were up, and it's great. It was crazy. She's what is it? Cocoa for Cocoa Puffs. Cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs.
Cooper.
And so my guard was up, and I was like, man, the last thing I would want is to run into a conservative, and then they recognize that I'm a liberal.
Yeah.
And then I walked into a store, and I recognized my friend Colby, who is Trump as it gets, like he blended in pretty well to the surroundings, because he's, like he does blue collar kind of work. He's all about guns. He's super conservative all the way in for Trump. And I was so happy to see him there. And I was wearing capris and probably my rainbow hat, and and it's so funny that I was like, the worst thing that could happen at this point is somebody realized that I'm liberal, and then like I ran into someone that I know what his beliefs are, he knows what my beliefs are, but I know who he is as a human,
right?
And I was like, oh, it's this human that I know, that 99.9999999% of things that we assume and hold dear and care about are shared. So we don't talk about those things, right? We talk about the ways where we diverge, and we diverge in important ways that are not as important as friendship or as humanity or as that kind of thing. And he, so like, it's an imagined enemy that I'm afraid of, and it's an imagined enemy that I'm fighting, It's not real.
Yep. Looking forward to hopefully getting back to the times when you can go to like a dude ranch and it's like, oh, this is quaint and fun, and not like, I hope nobody like starts talking about Trump or pulls a gun on me.
Yeah. And it's so funny that I actually have the impulse to start it. I want to be like, you guys are all wrong, and I'm, here's what I think. Right. And I have been strongly into politics my whole life.
Mm-hmm.
And I've never had that feeling of like, I have a side, there's another side. I'm, it's by geography, it's by religion, it's by all of these dividers, and I cannot see eye to eye, and I will not, and I refuse to. In fact, my community demands that I not see eye to eye with these other people. My community has said, you are the enemy, and I cannot fraternize with the enemy.
Mm-hmm.
Anyways, I'm stuck in a political loop.
Yeah, I feel that's I'm the same thing. I'm stuck in a loop, and I need to jolt myself out of it. We'll get there. Hopefully one day, maybe.
This is what I have so much more I want to say. It's because I miss you, and it piles up in my brain. I want to say like, and another thing, I noticed this thing the other day. So
take notes. We have lots more time to talk about it next time.
Yeah, this is.
I've got things. I got plenty to say about it too. I'm gonna let you vent a little bit, but I got all kinds of things to say.
That's good. Yeah, this was I look forward to questions and comments and concerns about. I feel like I'm already dreading the clumsy things I said. So,
you're fine. That does remind me. One thing I would think that we haven't done it in a while, but I want to, maybe I'll put this at the beginning or something. I really want to encourage our listeners to communicate with us and send us some questions or disagreements, or especially it'd be great if you did grab your phone and open up the recorder app, record a question for us or a statement or whatever, and we can play it on the show and we can answer it or talk about it or etc.
We would love to hear from you. It's fills me with joy, and you don't have to agree with us, or
absolutely
you can agree with us mostly and then say you really missed an opportunity here, and that is always great for us to hear.
Yeah, or we can just tell you how you're wrong.
Yeah, that's that's why I enjoy when you disagree, because then I can be like, it's going to feel so good when I just level this person with logic.
Well, I hope that's next week. I guess the Supreme Court's done for a while, so we can breathe a sigh of relief.
No, we can't, Steve. It's because it's it ends with a cliffhanger, but then they're like, next season, stay tuned for a preview of what's coming next. And it's all bad. Yeah. And it's going to, sorry, you were trying to,
it's something.
You were trying to
be positive.
Back into positive.
Yeah, come on.
Sorry, keep going.
Hopefully everything will be just easy breezy. The next, don't open anything on your phone. Don't look at the news. Don't listen to the radio. Just get an audiobook that's nice and fluffy about dragons or something. And then, just put your head in the sand for a while. It's probably good for you once in a while.
I think it maybe is, yeah. I'm reading about mushrooms. It's not...
Dude, I just watched the first couple episodes of the Michael Pollan thing. Is it?
No, what's it say?
Totally different mushroom stuff. This is psychedelic mushrooms.
No, mine are there's a little bit of psychedelics, but...
Yeah, mushrooms are fascinating. Have you seen the Fabulous Fungi on Netflix?
No, this is my first introduction. I didn't even know mushrooms existed until about a month ago when I picked up this book, and now it's just blowing my mind. They're everywhere. They're not plants. They're not animals.
No, they talk to each other.
Yeah.
Well, there's
a new to all of the world's problems.
There's a new 4-part documentary series by Michael Pollan, based on his book "How to Change Your Mind" is the title.
Yeah, that's what I want to read. I have heard about that.
Yeah, so there's 4 episodes. The first episode's about LSD. The second one's about psilocybin from magic mushrooms. I don't know what the other 2 are. MDMA and something else. But fascinating stuff. Need to find me some mushrooms.
I think I know how now. So.
Really? Yeah. I'm afraid I'd eat the wrong one.
Yep. But anyways, there's no people. It's just plants talking to plants, breaking down
plants. Great. All right. Well, I will see you later, dude.
See you, Steve.
Hey, thanks for listening. We hope you got something out of the episode today. Check the show notes in your podcast app for all the links and references that were made, or you can find it all at followingthefire.com. If you'd like to support the show, please go to patreon.com/followingthefire to become a patron. And of course, we'd love it if you rate the podcast and share it with others. See you later.
And I'll give you all my heart. Don't you know it's all I have? Even on my heart can't compare with what you're worth. I have been running almost all my life, but you always chase me down.